This is a series of video lectures on service tax. In this lecture, we will see issues relating to works contract services. Now, what is works contract? It is interesting to know the background. When you purchase a flat, you tell your friends and relatives that you have purchased a flat. You do not say that you have purchased cement, steel, building material or bathroom fittings, because your intention was to purchase a ready flat. Your intention was not to purchase cement, steel, building material or bathroom fittings which are contained in that flat. Though the fact is that you do become owner of all that material, but your intention was to purchase a flat. Similarly, when you take a Xerox copy, your intention is not to purchase a paper. Your intention is to get an image. When you take a Xerox, you do not treat it as purchase of paper, though actually you become owner of the paper on which that Xerox image is there. Similarly, if a textile fabric is given for dyeing, it is not treated as purchase of dyes, though the dyeing unit uses dyes to color that fabric, because the person who is sending the fabric has no intention of purchasing the dyes. His intention was to get his fabric colored. Now, these are the examples where the contract is not for purchase of goods as goods, though in effect you become owner of such goods which are contained in such contracts. So, these are indivisible contracts which comprise of material plus service, and your intention was never to purchase goods as goods or chattel as chattel. And hence, in an old case, in State of Madras versus Gann and Ankerle, Supreme Court held that tax cannot be levied on works contract because it is not a sale of goods contract. To get over this decision, Constitution was amended in 1982 by 46th Amendment, and the amendment provided that such a contract will be deemed as sale of goods. So, Article 366(29)(a) defines deemed sale of goods as follows: a tax on sale or purchase of goods includes a tax on the transfer of property in goods, whether as goods or in some other form involved in the execution of a works contract. Now, the important words as whether as goods or in some other form. That means the transfer of property may be goods as goods, or the goods may get converted into part of immovable property like cement, steel, etc. They do not remain goods as goods. They actually become part of the immovable property. Even then, for the purpose of sales tax or state VAT, it will be treated as a deemed sale of goods, and then service tax will become payable. Generally, it is said that VAT is payable on works contract. That is not the correct term to use. The correct term to use is that VAT is payable on goods involved in works contract and not on works contract as such. Now, an indivisible contract has been bifurcated artificially or by deeming provision into two portions, service portion and material portion. On the material portion, that is goods portion, VAT can be levied and indeed is levied by state government, and on service portion in execution of a works contract, service tax is payable. So, service portion in the execution of a works contract has been defined as a declared service under section 66E H of Finance Act 1994. By this deeming provision, an indivisible or composite contract has been bifurcated into sale of goods for VAT and sales tax and provision of service for service tax. So, this deeming provision is both in the Constitution as well as service tax law. Now, works contract has been defined in service tax, section 65B 54. What it says, works contract means a contract where transfer of property in goods involved in the execution of such contract is leviable to tax as sale of goods, and so this is the first condition. And what is the second condition? Such contract is for the purpose of carrying out construction, erection, commissioning, installation, completion, fitting out, repair, renovation, alteration of any movable or immovable property, or for carrying out any other similar activity or a part thereof in relation to such property. So, various activities have been defined, and broadly almost any activity on movable or immovable property may get covered. It may be noted that up to 1st July 2012, the definition of works contract for the purpose of service tax covered only immovable property. However, from 1st July 2012, works contract will include works contract relating to movable property also. Now, what are the highlights of definition of works contract? Firstly, this definition is different from definition under Central Sales Tax Act or state VAT laws. However, though the definitions are different, broadly coverage would be more or less same under VAT law, under CST Act, and also under service tax provisions, because both movable and immovable property is covered. The requirement is that contract should be leviable to tax as sale of goods. The definition does not say that tax should be paid or tax must have been paid on such a contract. What it merely says that contract should be leviable to tax. So, even if you do not actually pay the tax, if the contract is leviable on such contract, then it will fall within the definition of works contract for the purpose of service tax. As I pointed out, both movable and immovable property is covered. So, what are the transactions likely to get covered under works contract service? Construction of building and civil structure, laying of pipelines, erection and commissioning, composite annual maintenance contract covering both supply of spares and provision of service. If the AMC contract does not cover the value of spares, that is, it is a purely labor contract, then obviously it is not a works contract, and then service tax is payable on entire 100% amount. Even job work, where some material is used by job worker, will fall within the definition of works contract for the purpose of service tax. Now, in case of works contract services, and relief has been given. In some cases, in case of many construction services, particularly in infrastructure sector, service tax is exempt. Now, it may happen that a contractor may subcontract that work to a another service provider. Now, as per strict law, even if the contractor is exempt from service tax, the subcontractor may not be able to avail that exemption. In such cases, it has been provided if the subcontractor is also covered under works contract and he is providing service to a main contractor who is also covered under works contract, then service tax is not payable by the subcontractor, subject to the condition that service of main contractor should be exempt. If service of main contractor is not exempt, or if main contractor is not coming under works contract, or if the subcontractor is not coming under works contract definition, then this exemption is not applicable. For example, if the subcontractor is providing only manpower or providing only some labor job which is not covered under works contract provision, then he will be liable to pay service tax and he cannot avail exemption under this provision. Now, once the service is covered under works contract, then obviously valuation is required. Principally, you can calculate value of service in case of works contract on costing plus profit basis. Suppose your contract is covered under works contract and you are paying VAT to state government. There also two schemes are available under state VAT laws. In one scheme, you can pay service tax only on the value of material by calculating the value on actual basis. If you cannot do so, then even under state VAT law, a composition scheme is available where you pay VAT, that is state sales tax, at some flat rate which may be 6%, 8% or 10% depending on the provisions of that state VAT law. Now, if you are paying state VAT on the basis of actual value of material and not under composition scheme, then you can deduct that value from the total value of the contract and pay service tax only on the difference. But this should be so only if you are paying state VAT on actual value of material and not under composition scheme. Now, if you cannot find the value of services either on costing basis or by deducting the value of material on actual basis used for state VAT purposes, then composition schemes are available. These are of course optional. Now, what are the various composition schemes? If the works contract is of original works, that is basic construction or erectioning and commissioning, then service tax is payable on 40% of total amount. If the works contract relating to maintenance or repair or reconditioning or restoration or servicing of any goods, goods means movable property, then service tax is payable on 70% of the amount. AMC will get covered under this provision. Other contracts may also get covered relating to goods. In case of other contracts, that is which are not covered under 40% or 70% scheme, then 60% tax is payable. Now, in case of construction contract, where the value includes the value of land, then service tax is payable on 25% of the total amount. This scheme is covered under abatement scheme, though really legally and practically it is a composition scheme only. Now, what is the definition of original work? Original work means all new construction, all types of additions and alterations to abandoned or damaged structure on land that are required to make them workable. That means it is sort of a complete renovation or complete remodeling. It is not only simple repairs. Then erection, commissioning or installation of plant, machinery or equipment or structures, whether prefabricated or not. This is the definition of original works, and in such cases service tax is payable on 40% of the amount. Of course, if it does not include the value of land. Then in case of other works contract, that is other than covered under 40% or 70%, including maintenance, repair, completion and finishing services such as glazing, plastering, floor and wall tiling, plastering, installation of electrical fittings of an immovable property will get covered under this 60% scheme. Broadly, finishing services will get covered, repairing services will get covered if those services include value of the material and are getting covered under works contract provision. This composition scheme under works contract is simple, but there is one risk under that scheme. Under the scheme, what is provided is that if the contractee, that is customer, supplies some material to the main contractor or the main service provider, then value of that material will be added in the amount charged by the service provider, that is the contractor, and after adding that amount, then this 40%, 60% or 70% amount is calculated. Thus, what is provided is that fair value of material supplied by contractee is required to be added. Not only price, but used word is fair value of material is to be added. And of course, if he provides some free services, that will also have to be added, and then this 40% or 60% or 70% amount will have to be calculated. Now, suppose you have a contract for erection of machinery or equipment, and then the machinery or equipment which is to be erected is supplied by the contractee, that is the service receiver, which will of course be the case. In that case, whether the value of that machinery or equipment will have to be added for calculating this 40% amount. If it is added, then obviously the 40% amount of in such case will be abnormal. For example, value of machinery may be say 20 lakhs and erection and commissioning charges may be say 2 lakhs, and then if you go for this 40% scheme, you may have to pay service tax at 40% on 22 lakhs, which is of course absurd. In my view, if there is contract for machinery and equipment to be erected, then value of such machinery is not required to be added for calculating this 40% amount. But if department takes such a view, then the service provider will come in great trouble and he should be careful. And in such cases, the scheme is risky. Now, free of cost material supplied by the contractee or the service receiver is required to be added. To get over this provision, the customer or the service receiver may say that I will not supply the steel cement free, but I will charge, I will raise an invoice on the contractor or the main service provider. So, instead of giving it free, he will charge some amount and say that it is not FOC material, it is not free of cost material, and hence it is not required to be added. To get over such sort of tax planning, what is provided that if customer charges some amount for material supplied, say rupees 60,000, and fair value of the material supplied is rupees 1 lakh, then the difference of rupees 40,000 will also be added. I mean 60,000 he has already charged, plus 40,000 will be added, thus total value of material will be taken as 1 lakh, and then this 40% or 60% or 70% will be calculated. For example, bill amount of contractor of works contract was rupees 10 lakhs and goods, that is cement and steel, of rupees 2 lakhs were supplied by customer to contractor free of cost, that is FOC material. This material was used by the contractor, that is service provider, for providing the works contract service. In such cases, gross amount charged will be rupees 12 lakhs and service tax at 4.944% will be calculated on 12 lakhs and not on 10 lakhs. Senvat credit of tax paid on input services and capital goods will be available, but not of duty paid on inputs. So, Senvat credit of excise duty paid on cement or steel or other building material is not available. Now, these are some of the issues connected with works contract service. A service provider may be providing more than one services, that is, he may be executing more than one works contract at 4 or 5 different places. In such cases, each works contract can be valued separately. That is, in case of some works contract, he may value on actual basis. In some cases, he may value on composition basis. So, this is permissible. So, it is not that if he takes a composition scheme for one works contract, he is bound by the scheme for all the works contracts which he is executing. Secondly, in case of works contract, in some cases 50% of the tax is payable by the service provider and 50% of the tax is payable by the service receiver. Now, in such cases also it has been provided that valuation of such works contract can be done differently by the service provider and service receiver. Of course, theoretically it is permissible, but practically this will not be easy at all. In case of works contract service, 50% of the tax is payable by service receiver if service provider of works contract service is individual, HUF, proprietary or partnership firm or AOP. This is under reverse charge mechanism, and service receiver is company or business entity incorporated as a body corporate. In such cases, the service receiver is liable to pay service tax on 50% of the amount. Now, mainly of course, construction service will get covered, but practically or legally even job work or AMC can get covered because it is actually a works contract under service tax provisions. Now, when reverse charge applies in case of works contract, the service receiver should be business entity. So, business entity has been defined as any person ordinarily carrying out any activity relating to industry, commerce or any other business or profession. Thus, even an educational institute or a charitable organization is undertaking some activity relating to industry or commerce, it can get covered under the definition of business entity. But even then it may not be liable to pay service tax under reverse charge, because all business entities are not covered under the definition. Business entities which are registered as body corporate, they are only covered under the reverse charge mechanism. So, body corporate means company, cooperative society or limited liability partnership. Only if they are receiving such works contract service, they will be liable to pay 50% tax under reverse charge mechanism, and the service provider should be individual or HUF or proprietary firm or partnership firm or AOP. If the service provider is also a company or a body corporate or LLP, then this reverse charge mechanism is not applicable and the service provider is liable to pay service tax on entire amount. So, if the service receiver is a charity organization, government, trust or firm or individual, then this provision is not applicable, and in that case the service provider is liable to pay service tax on entire 100%, even if the service provider is individual, HUF, partnership firm, proprietary firm or association of persons. With this, we conclude the issues relating to service tax. Thank you very much. You are welcome to send your suggestions and feedback. Thank you.